The sky over New London was thick with smoke, the artificial glow of the Imperial patrol drones casting eerie reflections against the dense clouds. The city, once a beacon of Earth's resilience, now bore the scars of subjugation. Streets were lined with banners displaying the emblem of the Galactic Empire, a constant reminder of their rule. And tonight, in the Grand Square, another reminder was about to be made. Ilara Vasquez stood in the center of the raised execution platform, her hands bound behind her back. Blood trickled from a fresh cut on her lip, the result of her last act of defiance, spitting at the face of the Imperial officer reading out her charges. The crowd gathered before her, a mix of frightened civilians and silent resistance members who dared not make a move. She could see the familiar faces of those she had fought for, their expressions filled with helpless rage. By decree of the Galactic Empire, the officer announced, his voice amplified by the hovering drones, this woman is guilty of treason, conspiracy, and aiding terrorist elements. He turned to Ilara, his expression devoid of sympathy. Any last words? She lifted her head, her dark eyes burning with defiance. You fear us, she said, her voice steady. That's why you kill us. But fear isn't the same as control. The officer sighed. He had heard defiant last words before. They never changed anything. A sharp sound cut through the air, the activation of the energy blade. A weapon designed for precision. It would make her death quick. The officer gave no dramatic pause. He simply swung. The body hit the platform, the head rolling to a stop at the officer's feet. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Empire's signal drones broadcasted the execution across Earth's networks. A warning, a lesson, a statement of power. But they had no idea what they had just done. Across the wastelands of what was once Eastern Europe, in a hidden bunker miles beneath the surface, a man watched the screen in silence. His eyes, once dulled by years of exile, now burned with something primal. General Leon Graves had long abandoned the war, retreating into obscurity after Earth's surrender. He had seen too much, lost too much. Fighting had taken everything from him. But as he watched Ilara die, he felt something he had not felt in years. Rage. A soldier stood beside him, shifting uneasily. Sir, I. Leon raised a hand, silencing him. The bunker's dim lighting cast deep shadows across his face, emphasizing the lines etched into his skin from years of battle and loss. He took a deep breath, steadying the storm within. They think they've won, he murmured, more to himself than to his companion. The soldier hesitated before speaking. Earth isn't ready for another fight. We have no resources, no leadership. The resistance is fractured. Leon turned to him, and for the first time in years, the fire of a leader was in his gaze. Then we'd give them leadership. The words were not spoken loudly, yet they carried a weight that made the soldier straighten his posture. Outside the bunker, the wasteland stretched for miles, remnants of war still littering the ground. But beneath the surface, something long buried was beginning to stir. The Empire had made a mistake, and soon they would understand the cost. The old war map flickered in the dim light of the bunker, its holographic display casting shifting blue shadows across the metal walls. Leon stood at the center, arms crossed, studying the Imperial outpost that dotted Earth like a sickness. The resistance had always been there, scattered, fighting in the dark, but without direction. Now, they had won, and soon, the Empire would learn what it meant to corner a predator. The room was silent, save for the occasional hum of machinery and the quiet murmurs of those waiting for orders. Leon let the silence stretch, measuring the men and women who had come at his call. Some were former soldiers like him, ghosts of Earth's fallen armies. Others were smugglers, engineers, hackers, the kind of people who knew how to survive under occupation. All of them had the same look in their eyes. Grief hardened into something sharp. 30 hours ago, Leon said finally, his voice steady, the Empire executed a woman in New London. They wanted to send a message. He turned, his gaze sweeping over them. Now we send one back. A murmur rippled through the room, anticipation mixed with unease. A younger man, face scarred from an old plasma burn, shifted forward. His name was Doran, a former resistance leader who had lost half his unit in a failed ambush years ago. We've struck before, Doran said. Hit convoys, sabotaged supply chains. It never lasts. They hit back harder. Leon stepped closer, his presence an unshakable force. That's because you've been fighting to survive. We're not doing that anymore. His voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut through the air. We're fighting to win. Silence. Then a voice from the back. Maeve, a former sniper, arms crossed as she leaned against the cold metal wall. And how exactly do we do that? Leon reached out and tapped the glowing map. A red marker pulsed over a transport route outside the ruins of Cairo. Imperial supply convoy. Weapons, fuel, rations. Enough to arm every resistance cell from here to the Atlantic. He met their eyes, one by one. We take it. Completely. No survivors. No signal sent back. We move fast, hit hard, and disappear before they know what happened. It was a bold move, riskier than anything the Resistance had attempted in years. And that was exactly why it would work. The plan was set in motion within hours. Beneath the cover of night, Leon and his team moved through the remains of the old desert highways, their figures blending into the endless sands. The convoy was ahead, 3 armored transports, lightly guarded. The Empire had grown complacent. They believed Earth resistance was too broken to strike with any real force. A fatal assumption. Leon signaled, and the ambush began. EMP charges detonated first, sending arcs of blue energy crackling through the air. The lead transport shuddered, its system frying instantly. Before the guards could react, gunfire erupted from the dunes, precise and lethal. Leon moved like a shadow, his rifle bucking against his shoulder with every shot. He had spent years in exile, but muscle memory never faded. A soldier did not forget war. Doran's team swept in from the left, cutting down the remaining guard before they could send a distress call. It was over in minutes. Efficient, ruthless. Leon stepped over the bodies, scanning the wreckage. The supplies were intact. Weapons, fuel, medical packs. A victory. But more than that, it was a message. He turned to Maeve, who was wiping blood from her knife. Burn the bodies. Leave nothing that tells them who did this. She gave him a long look, then nodded. Understood. By the time the Empire realized what had happened, the Resistance would be long gone. But this was only the beginning. The real war was about to start. The Imperial Governor of Earth, Malix Voron, stood in his private chamber aboard the Aegis Dawn, watching the planet spin slowly below. His reflection in the glass was as rigid as a man himself. Sharp features, cold eyes, and a uniform that bore the insignia of an empire that had never known true defeat. Until now, the transmission replayed before him, a grainy security feed from the ruins of Cairo. His supply convoy reduced to smoldering wreckage. His soldiers cut down with merciless efficiency. And the silence, no distress calls, no survivors. This was not the work of scattered rebels. This was something else. Something dangerous. A door hissed open behind him. Commander Rannick, his most trusted officer, stepped inside, his expression grim. "Sir, we've identified the leader of the attack." Voron did not turn. "Who?" "General Leon Graves." For the first time in years, a ripple of unease passed through Voron. That name belonged to a ghost, a relic of a war Earth had already lost. He had read the reports. Graves had vanished after surrender. Broken. Finished. Or so it had seemed. He exhaled slowly. Then the Resistance is no longer a nuisance. It's a threat. Rannick hesitated. "Your orders, sir." Voron finally turned, his voice like steel. "We do what we should have done years ago. We end this world defiance once and for all." Within hours, Imperial warships darkened Earth's skies, descending with fire and fury. Their target was no longer just a resistance. It was Earth itself. The Empire would burn the hope from its people, root and stem. But Leon had planned for this. Deep within the underground network of bunkers and tunnels, he watched the invasion begin. From old satellites, he tracked the descent of dropships, the deployment of Imperial ground forces. He had spent years studying the way the Empire moved, how they thought, and he knew exactly how to break them. Maeve stood beside him, loading a fresh magazine into her rifle. "They are bringing their full strength," she said, eyes flicking over the tactical display. "This isn't a suppression mission. It's an extermination." Leon nodded. "Then we make them regret it." Outside, Resistance forces were already in motion. Fighters hidden within ruined cities emerged like ghosts, striking from alleyways and collapsing tunnels behind retreating squads. Stolen anti-air cannons roared to life, sending Imperial dropships plummeting in flames. Every civilian who had lived under the Empire's rule had been waiting for this moment. And now, they rose as one. But the true strike came from above. Leon had gambled everything on a single stolen Imperial warship, a captured vessel from their first raid. It wasn't much, not against the might of the Aegis Dawn, but it had one advantage. No one expected it. As Varen's fleet tightened its grip on Earth, the stolen warship ignited its engines and hurtled toward the command vessel. By the time the Empire realized what was happening, it was too late. The explosion tore through the sky, a blinding fireball that shattered the heart of the invasion. The Aegis Dawn burned, its wreckage falling in pieces to the planet below. The remaining Imperial forces, leaderless and panicked, began to falter. Leon stepped onto the battlefield as a final battle raged, his rifle steady, his presence a beacon of defiance. He was not just a general now, he was vengeance made flesh. And the Empire, for all its might, was crumbling beneath him. By the time the sun rose over the ruins, the impossible had happened. The Empire had retreated. Leon stood atop the wreckage of an enemy war machine, blood staining his armor, his breath heavy with exhaustion. He turned to the scattered survivors, the warriors who had fought beside him. "We were never weak," he said, his voice carrying over the wind. "They only thought we were." Silence hung in the air, then a roar of victory rose from the resistance. The Empire had come to break Earth. Instead, they had awakened its deadliest weapon. And now, the war was far from over. The Imperial distress signals still flickered across the ruined battlefield, weak echoes of a broken fleet calling for reinforcements that would never come. The warships that had once darkened Earth's sky were now nothing more than shattered husks, burning in the upper atmosphere or lying in twisted ruins across the landscape. The Resistance had done the impossible. They had won. But Leon Graves knew better than to celebrate. He stood on the edge of the ruined command outpost, his rifle slung across his back, watching as the survivors gathered below. The Resistance fighters, once scattered, afraid, moved with new purpose. They scavenged weapons from fallen enemies, tended to the wounded, reinforced their defenses. They were no longer just rebels. They were an army. Maeve approached, blood smeared across her face, her usual sharp gaze unreadable. Scouts report the last Imperial ground squads have either surrendered or been wiped out. We own the battlefield. Leon exhaled, rolling his shoulders. For now. She studied him, then crossed her arms. You don't think they'll come back? It wasn't a question. They will, he said. This wasn't just a skirmish. We didn't take a city. We took their pride. He gestured toward the wreckage of the Aegis Dawn, its broken form still smoldering in the distance. And the Empire doesn't forgive humiliation. Doran approached, his limp more pronounced than before, a deep gash wrapped hastily in bandages. He looked exhausted but determined. The people are with us now. All of them. The moment the Empire's fleet burned, cities started rising up. Garrisons are being wiped out in 3 major zones. They're running scared. Leon nodded, but his expression remained grim. He had seen this before, victory that felt absolute, only for the enemy to return twice as strong. The Empire had lost a fleet, but they had thousands more. He could already imagine the response forming in some distant war room, cold and methodical. They would not make the same mistake twice. Maeve watched him carefully. You're thinking about what comes next. Leon glanced at the sky, the stars barely visible through the lingering smoke. We made them bleed, he said. Now we make sure they never stand again. She smirked, shaking her head. And here I thought you were done with war. So did I. In the distance, survivors cheered as another Imperial banner was torn down, trampled into the date. The first battle was over, but the war had only just begun.